Et si jamais tu te demandes, c'est fait par Binge Audio.
Hello and welcome to Chaud Dedans. I am happy for English speakers to discover my podcast about women over 45 plus. We've been discussing topics around aging and menopause for 2 years now. And this week, I'm happy to welcome a very special guest. The New York Times has ranked her 17th amongst the most influential female scientists in the world. And she's one of the leading specialists in menopause and its effects on the brain. It is the brain, and not our ovaries, that is responsible for the vast majority of our symptoms. Hot flashes, irritability, sleep loss, and of course, brain fog. You know, those maddening memory lapses where you forget the name of your neighbor, the code to your iPad, the title of the film that you loved. That feeling of being a little confused at times. Apparently, more than 75% of us develop neurological symptoms during menopause, which is why the research conducted by Dr. Lise Mosconi is so essential. Her book, The Menopause Brain, has finally been translated into French. Lisa holds a PhD in neuroscience. She also has family members with Alzheimer's disease, which led her to study the brain, particularly in women. Lisa, so excited to have you with us. Thank you so much. So is it true over 3/4 of all women develop brain symptoms during menopause?
Yes. So, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's really lovely to see you in person and to have this conversation. And yes, it is important for women to appreciate that up to 3/4 of all women do experience neurological symptoms during the menopause transition and potentially also after menopause is technically complete and we start the postmenopausal phase. Most women are familiar with hot flashes.
Yes.
Right? Hot flashes and night sweats. Mm-hmm. But they don't necessarily realize that those symptoms come from the brain.
Definitely.
So this is something that we always talk to our patients about because they may come to us and say there's something wrong with my skin, right? I'm sweating, I have the chills, and they feel like there's something wrong with my skin. And we're like, no, actually that's your brain. It's something that happens in the brain as we go through menopause, that the brain, basically the part of the brain that controls body temperature may be glitching. And that leads to hot flashes, which are experienced by approximately 3/4 of all women with or without additional neurological brain symptoms like brain fog, up to 62% of all women. Sleep disturbances, lots of women, right? So, yeah.
So what is going on exactly with the brain when that happens, all these symptoms?
We are learning, we're trying to do more and more research to better understand the neurophysiology of menopause. But what we have learned is that women's brains contain a lot of estrogen receptors, which basically hormones like estrogen and progesterone, they do work like a key that needs to open a lock in order to function. So the hormones are the key and the locks are called estrogen receptors. These receptors are present throughout the body and also in the brain. And they are the component of the hormonal system that tells the brain what to do. So they're very abundant in specific parts of the brain, like a region called the hypothalamus. It's a teeny tiny little gland that has a really important function, in part by regulating body temperature. So when estrogen is consistent, has a constant level, then the estrogen receptors are happy, they're full, and the hypothalamus works steadily. But if the hormones start fluctuating, the estrogen receptors will start glitching, and that part of your brain will start glitching too, which means that your brain is going to have a hard time regulating your body temperature, and that's how we get the hot flashes. In part, more parts of the brain are involved, but that's like the key part. And the same for sleep. There's a part of the brain in the brainstem, which goes down to the spinal cord, that is important for sleep regulation and sleep and wake cycles. And that part also includes a lot of estrogen receptors. So if that's glitching, and the hypothalamus is glitching, then we get night sweats. So the hot flashes back at night. And the same is true for the memory parts of the brain, for the frontal cortex that's in charge of thinking and reasoning. So there's a whole anatomy of menopause inside the brain that is activated and deactivated depending on hormonal concentrations.
And what I find puzzling, Lisa, is that doctors often fail to connect menopause with these symptoms.
I think in part the problem is that in Western medicine, every organ has a doctor, right? If you have an issue with your eye, you go to the eye doctor. If you have a problem with your heart, you go to a cardiologist. And menopause has been associated with the ovaries for hundreds of years. So if you have issues with ovarian function, if you go through menopause, you go to a gynecologist to check on your ovaries and your reproductive function. But a gynecologist is unlikely to be able to manage or make recommendations around your brain health, right? But then brain specialists like neurologists and psychiatrists are just not trained to address menopause. So we are in this weird situation where we need an integrative medicine approach to menopause, which is not just a one organ condition, if you will, or change. We need a more integrative approach where perhaps different specialists are being called in depending on the symptoms that the woman experiences. And we've been doing this where I work. I run the Alzheimer's prevention program in the Alzheimer's prevention clinic at Weill Cornell Medicine, New York Presbyterian in New York City. And I'm in neurology and radiology and neuroscience. And what we do is that we triage with other departments. So we work with gynecology, we work with the menopause clinic, but we also work with cardiology, we work with endocrinology, work with psychiatry, so that everyone is involved as needed.
I was really fascinated in your book about how, as women, our brain reshapes throughout our lives. We don't have the same brain when we are children, teenagers, mothers, or menopausal women.
Yes, there is a rewiring that takes place in women's brains that I find so fascinating. And men don't go through it, except puberty, obviously. But then all the changes that can happen during pregnancy and postpartum and then menopause, it really speaks to how adaptable our brains are. And we never talk about it. We never celebrate women's brains and women's bodies as being so dynamic and so resilient. We're always looking at the downsides, right? You birthed a human being. You just had a child, and of course, your entire body and your brain are reshaped by that experience. In fact, pregnancy is probably the most massive hormonal transformation that any woman can ever go through. And some women have more than one child, right? So every time the brain remodels. And really, I like to talk about the 3 Ps. So it's puberty, pregnancy, and perimenopause, the transition to menopause. Those are very similar from a brain perspective. There is this massive surge of hormones in puberty and pregnancy, and then there's a withdrawal in perimenopause. But the effects are similar. Like, we know more clearly about puberty and pregnancy, but what we do know is that counterintuitively, that's when the brain gets rid of a lot of neurons and neuronal connections. And that's an intelligent adaptation, because you don't need to have a ton of neurons. In fact, if you're a brain, you want to be smaller, you want to be leaner, but really well connected. And that's what happens in puberty. You don't need all these neurons that are like, how do I ride a bike? How do I do my timetables? You know that. So those neurons, those connections can go. Now we need to strengthen up our brains to become social beings and potentially parents, right? We don't necessarily want to be parents at 12 or 13, but our bodies could, right? And so all these parts of the brain that are needed to become more mindful and more socially present and engaged need to strengthen up. And then once you're pregnant and you have a baby, the postpartum stage is a huge rewiring where we do lose gray matter again for up to 2 years after the baby is born. But that, again, appears to be an intelligent adaptation because now your brain needs to be so focused on this little bundle of joy who is completely helpless without you. And so the primitive parts of your brain become stronger again and better connected. They take over from your thinking parts, so that you're ready to just run to the rescue. And I think that's absolutely beautiful. But the downside is the mommy brain, right? It's the brain fog. Is that you have no clue where your keys are. Or you haven't slept in forever, but you keep going. And the same kind of process, I feel, is my own personal interpretation, but I think there's something similar happening with menopause.
Okay.
Because menopause is a renovation project on the brain. All the connections that were needed for the brain to initiate the pregnancy and host the pregnancy and then take care of a newborn baby, those are no longer necessary, and your brain knows it. The ovaries are telling the brain, we're done. We have closed down shop. You can get rid of all the infrastructure because that's never happening again. And so the brain is getting rid of neurons that we no longer need. Neurons that are needed to have a menstrual cycle or to have follicular deployment or to have a uterus enlargement, right? So all those connections can go.
Yeah.
And the brain rewires itself again in ways that makes women more, in some ways more empathic, the research shows, but also potentially more content.
Okay.
There's research, especially from Europe. Again, it's good to be menopausal in Europe, evidently. The research shows that life contentment takes a dip during perimenopause and menopause, but then it comes back up either to the same level or higher, where many postmenopausal women report being happier than they themselves used to be before going through menopause. So I think, we do get the hot flashes, we may get the brain fog and, the depression and whatnot, but then at the end of the line, the upside is that, number one, your brain needs to go through it, and number two, all this rewiring may actually lead to better mental health, let's put it that way, as you get older. And now the point for us is, how do we support our brains and bodies during the transition so that we don't need to experience the dip in contentment and health and whatnot?
I can't tell you, Lisa, how much this is music to my ears. That, the brain reorganizes and it doesn't stay in that state of, brain fog. That's what we call it. One thing you talk about in your book also is the fact that there is too little research based on the female body as opposed to research based on the male body, which is why we are lacking research regarding menopause, right?
Yes, a lot of brain research has been done on men, male animals predominantly, because hormones complicate things effectively. But then when we switch to clinical research, it's either men are the majority in older studies, and now more recently we have men and women together, but we don't look at sex-specific effects. So that's obviously an issue because things that are specific to women that men do not experience just don't get studied, right? So men don't go through menopause. So we haven't had information on menopause. I really think that if men experience menopause the way that women do, we would have a lot of solutions and the research would have been done. Instead, it's us, and the idea is it's just staging, it's just that you're a woman, suck it up, soldier on, good luck, right? And don't talk to anyone about it, and please be quiet. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate.
And you are also absolutely annoyed that there are no clinical trials testing HRT in dementia prevention. And you say that's simply unacceptable, and I agree.
Thank you. So we do have one clinical trial that is quite old. It's the Women's Health Initiative. That trial looked at specific hormonal formulations that we don't really use anymore today, but they tested those hormonal formulations in older women who were in their 70s and 80s, which we learned from the trial is too late. And actually, to be honest, we knew that from decades of preclinical research showing that hormone therapy for menopause is appropriate as you go through menopause, not 20, 30 years later necessarily, right? It's best to support a woman's body and brain during the transition. So would am I annoyed? I would say I'm not pleased. But yes, there are no trials that tested hormone therapy for Alzheimer's prevention in women in midlife. So this is something we're looking into right now. I don't know if you know, but we just launched what is now described as the largest global research program on women's health and Alzheimer's risk ever attempted.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. I'm very, very excited about that. I'm the program director. It's a $50 million research program sponsored by Wellcome Leap, which is an independent subsidiary of the Wellcome Trust. So we're talking about research in Europe. This is huge. And it's a coalition among scientists. So I ran the program, I designed it. It's my program conceptually. But then what we do is that we are working with 78 leading scientists all over the world to address this together. Mm-hmm. And there is strength in numbers. We need people to come together and work together also because we need consensus. Right? And if everybody's just doing their little part, it's going to take forever to get to a point where we agree on things. So we're just working together and we should have results in 3 years.
Oh, that's awesome news. Lisa, I was talking before about the brain fog that has been bothering me quite a bit. What's going on with that?
So brain fog is a challenging phenomenon that is experienced by between 40 and 62% of all women in midlife. It is a non-specific term, right? But in clinical practice, we refer to brain fog as mental fatigue or cognitive fatigue, which is that feeling that your brain just won't turn on no matter what you do or don't do, that you have almost like a cloudiness inside your head. And more specifically, it's called subjective cognitive impairment. And it's very upsetting to many, many women, especially women who really need to rely on their brain power, not just in everyday life, but for work. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming one reason that evidently many women decide to retire early or quit their jobs. Whereas it would be so much better if we could just address it clinically and medically and provide support. So this is something we're looking into right now. What is happening exactly is not known, especially as related to menopause. But the idea is that estrogen, in particular, is a very energizing hormone. It literally goes inside your brain. And one of the functionalities is that it pushes your brain cells, your neurons, to work harder and to make more energy. And we have shown and others have shown that as women go through menopause, at different stages of menopause, there seems to be an imbalance, if you will, in energy production inside the brain, in some of the same brain regions that are impacted by disorders like Alzheimer's disease. And so many women will come to us and say, I can't function. I'm worried that I may be experiencing early onset dementia. And then we do all these tests and all these exams, and we're like, well, it's more likely to be menopause, which is reassuring in many, many ways and upsetting in other ways, because now the question is how can we help women who do experience brain fog in midlife, in particular because of menopause.
You describe specifically a 30% drop in brain energy during this transition. Now, is this temporary or is it permanent? I think people ask themselves the question.
Yeah, so 30% is in our studies. I want to be absolutely clear that we are working with women at risk for Alzheimer's disease. So those are women with a family history of Alzheimer's disease and or genetic risk factors for Alzheimer's. We are now trying to understand if other women also exhibit similar changes, and many more scientists are looking into that. Is it temporary or not? It depends. We are now doing longitudinal studies. We're following the same women over time, and the results are not published yet. So for now, what I can say is that different women may show different trajectories. The most likely scenario is that there is a decline and then stabilization, and then it plateaus. For some women, there may be a rebound in the recovery in energy levels. For other women, it is possible that the decline is more progressive, and that may lead to cognitive impairment and whatnot down the line. We can't yet predict who is going down what pathway, but we're doing the work now. See, this is why I'm excited about this new program of research, because we have now access to data from, if everything works out as planned, almost 100 million women from all over the world. And then we'll be able to really provide more conclusive evidence.
I said in the beginning that you had cases of Alzheimer's in your close family, and that's why you started all the research on the excess brain. There is one number we should be concerned about. Women are twice as likely to be diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and to develop Alzheimer's disease. That's what you say in your book.
It's correct. Yes, unfortunately, women are twice as likely as men to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, like a GAD is a generalized anxiety disorder, depression, and Alzheimer's disease as well, and dementia. So this is something we need to look into. And I think another statistic that is concerning, in my opinion, is that, we clearly frame breast cancer as a women's health issue, as it should be. And a lot of research and a lot of funding has gone into hopefully preventing breast cancer, at a minimum treating breast cancer. The truth is that a woman in her 60s is twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's than breast cancer.
Wow.
Yes, and the numbers of Alzheimer's cases are increasing. So I believe that Alzheimer's disease should also receive the same level of attention and funding when it comes to women's health. And this is not the case just yet.
Definitely.
Which I find upsetting.
Yeah.
And we'll get there. We'll get there, but we're not there.
And is it true that women who experience hot flashes earlier in life may be at higher risk for heart disease?
Possibly. This is relatively new research, and this descriptive research. So it's important to do studies that really tease out what is correlational and what is predictive of. So we do know that there is an association between more severe hot flashes and earlier onset of hot flashes, and an increased risk of something called endothelial dysfunction, which is a risk factor for heart disease and also for vascular dementia. So now the question is, do they just happen to occur around the same time, or is one leading to the other? And we're looking into this now. I do think that it's an important risk marker. And we do have preventative cardiology right now. So for women who do experience severe hot flashes, especially earlier on in life, it won't hurt to talk to a preventative cardiologist and make sure that everything is okay.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about depression. One thing that strikes me as the most problematic is that a lot of women under 50 are sent home with antidepressants when they might need another treatment, in fact.
That's also, yes, a hormone treatment. That's also another relic from the past when the neurological and psychiatric effects of menopause were really not well understood. So a woman, but still today, many women go to their primary physician and say, I'm sad, I'm tearful, I'm having a hard time, and their doctors will prescribe antidepressants because they still don't make the association with menopause. And there's this misconception that menopause happens when you're old, right? And I think all women should be aware that 51 is not old. And actually, all over the world, the average age in menopause is 49, so even a little bit younger. So we need to really make sure that all physicians, including primary care, right? When you go to your doctor, you don't go immediately to a specialist. You go to your family physician, you go to your PCP here in the States. We need to make sure, because they are the front line of healthcare. And it's important to make sure that they're aware that menopause can lead to symptoms that look like depression. But the cause is different.
It's a lot of women too, since roughly 20% of women experience mood swings or feelings of depression during perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah, I thought it was 40%, maybe in the States. Here, yeah, I think there's also a country-specific prevalence that is interesting to consider. I think in Europe, generally, European women are more likely to not suffer as much as here in the United States, where the symptoms appear to be more severe and more prevalent. And in other countries, unclear. There may be a lifestyle and environmental component, because like in Asia, Asia is huge. I'm thinking which part of Asia, but we don't need to get into details. But in some parts of Asia, women don't even experience the hot flashes as a symptom of menopause. They may get frozen shoulder. It's the most prevalent symptom, but not the hot flashes. And the symptoms tend to be milder in general. And that's been linked to factors like diet, like healthier diets than here in some Western countries, but also mindset. And mindset seems to play a big role in the way that one goes through menopause, whether if you're not scared of menopause, if you just don't worry too much about it, perhaps your symptoms may be milder. If you have a positive attitude towards aging in general and just being a woman in general, that seems to be associated with a gentler transition, obviously to be confirmed.
That is super, super interesting, Lisa. And tell me, should we all take testosterone? Because in France, barely any doctor will prescribe it, whether I think it's pretty common in the United States. Do you prescribe it?
We do not prescribe testosterone for menopause other than for, broadly speaking, low libido. So testosterone is approved for situations where women do experience hyposexual disorder or low libido. It is not currently approved for other indications, and we do follow, obviously, FDA regulations and professional guidelines. I think it would be very interesting to do more research. Anecdotally, actually, I have some friends who really love their testosterone, and they do prescribe it often to their patients. And I think anecdotally, they have observed an increase in energy for whatever that means, right? But more energy, more livelihood. And I think this would be very interesting to test in actual clinical trials. So again, we go back to the beginning. For many, many years, hormones, at least here in this country, were just given out like candy, like in the 70s and whatnot. And then that completely stopped in 2002, 2003. And it changed to do not touch them unless absolutely necessary. And I think now we're seeing a little bit of renaissance where the idea is we have them, let's just use them. Mm-hmm. I think as a scientist, I want to see data. I want the research to get done. I want very strong evidence for efficacy. I want to know what the risks are, short-term, long-term. So again, I think we're a couple of years away from having better more information.
You emphasize in your book on the Mediterranean diet that reduces the risk of depression. How does diet compare to HRT in managing menopausal symptoms?
It's a really good question. There is no direct data comparison. I think it's helpful to think of lifestyle as a baseline, as a foundation, right? Whatever you do with your lifestyle, it takes time to manifest into a symptom reduction or a risk reduction. Lifestyle needs to be implemented consistently, but then the benefits are for life. With hormone therapy or any medication, the impact is certainly stronger. It's a medication, right? But then perhaps the idea is that you don't need it for life. It's a tool that can help you bridge a difficult time or potentially challenging time in your life, but it's certainly not something you want to adopt forever. Some of my friends do. I have a friend who's like, I'm going to die with my patch on. But I think in general, if you can achieve health by being responsible for your lifestyle and your environment, your choices, that's a really good long-term strategy. And in that scenario, the Mediterranean diet or that kind of diet, without being too prescriptive, has been linked to better outcomes for women's health overall. Like you mentioned, the lower risk of depression, of anxiety, of dementia, of cardiovascular disease, of diabetes, better sleep. In general, it seems to be very favorable to women's health. And I think what's really important about that diet is two things. Number one, it wasn't just designed in a lab, because this happens all the time, right? Today we have the peanut butter diet. Tomorrow we have this other diet that just came out of nowhere, but somebody liked it. This is a diet that's been around for thousands of years with some different implementation. So it's time tested and it's flexible. It's not a restrictive diet, right? It really supports an abundance of nutrients.
Perhaps we should say what the Mediterranean diet is. It's olive oil, fruit and vegetables, no processed foods, obviously.
No processed foods, of course, fish, and smaller amounts of poultry and dairy, small amounts of meat, the occasional treat, coffee, if we want to. For those who do drink alcohol once in a while, a glass of red wine or white wine. So it's very pleasurable. It's very clean. It's a very clean, fiber-dense, antioxidant and anti-inflammatory compounds rich diet that's focused on minimally processed to not processed foods, and especially fresh. And the occasional piece of cheese and the nice baguette.
Of course.
Why not?
Yes.
I mean, life is for living. Life is for living. And diets should be conducive to health, while also uplifting the individual, I think.
I couldn't agree more, Lisa. And if you could change one thing about how menopause is discussed and treated in Western medicine today, what would it be?
Well, what we were talking about before, that right now menopause, for most women, we do associate menopause with the ovaries, and that's about it. Whereas I think that the symptoms that are really bothersome and potentially debilitating to women have nothing to do with the ovaries. They come either from the brain or from the heart, from other organs. So what I would change is the fragmented Western medicine approach towards an integrative medicine approach. I would also really like to bring some balance in the conversation, because I think that right now this has become a very hot topic, and people feel like they have to yell at each other and go to war with each other, which I find very bizarre in general. So I think that by the recommendation, just stay calm, right? This is a part of a woman's life. Every woman under the sun, God willing, will go through menopause at some point in our lives, right? Let's just accept the fact that we will. Let's just embrace it. No shame, no stigma, no embarrassment. Let's just talk about it. Let's make it into... Yeah, but that starts with conversations, with more and more women just being open about it and not being embarrassed. And, I haven't gone through menopause yet, but I tell people I'm preparing to go through menopause. And when I do, we will talk about it. Also, I want to party. When I went through puberty, my parents got me a gift. I was like, for one, just started to celebrate. I was like, oh, nice. When I was pregnant, I had balloons, I had baby showers. It was all this joy. And they said, when I go through menopause, I want to party. It's
you want
important.
a menopause party?
Yes, I do. It's such an important phase in a woman's life. And I want support. When we go through puberty, there is so much support, right? Everybody, hopefully, right? But your family will tell you what's happening. You can talk to your friends. There's sex ed at school. You know what's happening. You go through pregnancy, you have to go to class. At least here, you need to take courses before giving birth. There's the whole support system. When the baby's born, you go to the pediatrician and they test you, the mother, for depression. Because now we understand that some women have postpartum depression. There is no such framework for menopause. We are on our own. And it's unacceptable, right? We don't have to feel lonely. We don't have to feel alone or isolated. And I think this starts with women. Just be open and supportive of other women and be willing to share. And yeah, I think it's changing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Chaud Dedans. Please do not hesitate to reach out on Instagram if you want to make comments, or just tell me if you learned things with this episode. The account has the same name. I wish you a great day. Bye-bye.